This is a more personal meta episode that's going to go into the behind the scenes of this work that I do. So feel free to skip it. If you're part of my core, like hardcore fan base, then this episode is for you. And for those of you who are just new and want to consume just practical advice type of content, watch some other video of mine. All right, so this is going to go a little bit into like my thought process of how I'm going to be evolving my teachings going forward and where things are headed. So half the point of this episode is just to inform you, my core audience, of that, where we're going and how I'm thinking about evolving my teachings. And the other half of this episode is to clarify just for myself my own aims and intentions and to draw a line in the sand for myself as far as what my standards are for what I'll be teaching going forward. So it's time that my teachings significantly mature. That's the conclusion I've come to. I've been reflecting a lot on my role as a teacher and how I can best serve my life purpose over the last year. I've been, looking at almost 10 years of work. There's been a lot of growth and evolution that maybe some of you guys have noticed if you compare my earliest videos with my current ones. Quite a lot of stuff has changed for me. I've grown a lot. I've matured a lot. But now I need to go for the next level of maturity. And so I want to explain what that means here. You might have noticed that over the last year, I haven't been putting out as much content as I usually do. I like to put out one episode a week. I've been taking more breaks, and there's actually a list of reasons why I've been putting out less content last year. One of which is that I only really want to be putting out the highest quality stuff that I really believe in. No filler content, no easy content, which means like sometimes I skip a week because I just am not satisfied with the content that I'm working on at that time, or I don't feel the insights are particularly good, and it just needs more time to marinate, right? Because like I have to do research for all these episodes. Like I have to sit down and like think it through really deeply, and I have to generate genuine insight, right? So all my episodes are built on genuine insight. That means I have to generate that. I don't just read it in some book. I have to generate it, and then it has to be good. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good. It needs more time to marinate in my mind. Sometimes I work on an episode for months or even for over a year, just kind of brainstorming ideas loosely until something coheres that's worthy of an entire episode. Sometimes there's a topic that's kind of vague in my mind. I know it's an important topic, but I haven't fully articulated it even to myself. I'm not sure how to communicate it. It's something slippery and abstract, and I need more examples. And then some of the examples, usually the initial examples that I come up with are kind of not the best. I have to really brainstorm to come up with the juiciest examples. I have to think about how could people misinterpret what will be said to come up with, advice for the traps that people fall into. So all this kind of stuff, right? This takes time. And it's hard to do that on a schedule. But anyways, that's my work. I'm not really complaining about it. Other reasons is I've been facing chronic health problems over the last 2 years. And so I've been dealing with fixing my health stuff. That's been taking a lot of time and energy away from the Actualized work. So there's that. Getting that under control has been challenging. It's also been emotionally very taxing on me and so forth. So I've been working on that. I've also been just getting burned out, doing YouTube for 10 years very consistently tends to burn you out. So I've been taking more time off to work on my personal life. And I've been also working a lot on my dating life, on my intimate personal relationships, on my friendships. That's stuff that I've put on the back burner for the first 10 years of Actualized.org. And now I'm getting back into that just because it's something I personally need in order to be able to actually do the actualized work at the next level. I need to work on that stuff. I can't neglect it. So I've talked about that a bit in my episode called Burning Through Karma. So I've been devoting quite a bit of time to that. And as I devote time to that, that does take away energy and time from the videos. I've been integrating also some very crazy awakenings. The awakenings that I have lately are so profound that I don't know how to communicate them. And they just kind of stop me in my tracks. Yeah, they leave me, I don't know what to say. But I've been working on integrating those and then thinking about how to teach those in the future and how to guide people towards that. That's something I'll have more to say about that at the end of this episode and also in the next episode to come. Also, what I've been doing is I've been shutting off my mind. Part of integrating these deep, crazy awakenings was this necessary period of just like shutting off my mind and thinking a lot less. And the downside of that is that takes away from the videos, because the videos require a lot of contemplation, a lot of insight, a lot of like relative type of ideas. And in a certain sense, the awakenings, the crazy awakenings take you beyond all that. They take you beyond all the videos, all the content, all the linguistic, logical stuff. They take you way beyond all that. And so I've been learning to operate more from a mindset of just like no mind, shutting off the mind. And I've also been applying that in my relationships, in my dating life, and so forth. That was very necessary for me, but that does come at a trade-off in terms of my work. And I'm finding like a way to balance those, because if you completely shut off your mind, that turns off the spigot of insights, which is not ideal. But then if your mind is always active, that's also a problem, because then you're lost in mind all the time. So finding that balancing point is something I've been working on over the last year. And now finally I'm starting to reach that balancing point. I've also been rethinking my whole approach to teaching. Like, what do I really want out of being a teacher? I started thinking about that more, because at this point I have 10 years of my body of work out there. I've taught a lot of stuff. Like what comes next? Am I just going to be doing this for another 10 years? I don't want to be doing the same old thing. I want something new. I want to evolve it to the next level. Or I've been even thinking about moving on to other things if I can't evolve it to the next level. So I'll be talking more about that as we keep going. I've also been investing a lot of time just working on my own personal development, working on myself, personal stuff. Reflecting about my character, trying to polish up my character, make improvements, or just even thinking about what kind of improvements do I want to make to my own character. And just rethinking in general, like, what do I want out of life? I'm going to be approaching 40 soon. I'm 37 now. I'm going to be 40 in 3 years. That's going to be coming pretty soon. And I'm almost feeling like a sort of a midlife crisis of like, well, I've lived basically half my life already, if I'm lucky, half, maybe even more than half. And really the best half. I've lived the best half, the half where I'm the healthiest, the most mentally sharp, I have the most energy. That half is already gone. So now I'm thinking like, okay, what's left for me, right? And I've already accomplished a lot, but also I'm thinking like, what do I want for the second half of my life? How's my life really going to end? What's going to be my legacy? All that kind of stuff. So I'm thinking about that a lot. And that requires also not just thinking about it, but then making adjustments to my work. Over the years, putting out content for me has gotten harder and harder because my expectations for myself have become so much higher. Basically, as I've become more conscious through all the awakening and spiritual work and development work and all the research and study, it's really quite painful because I become conscious of all of my own tricks, my own ego, all of my own flaws, limitations, my own finitude, and all the mistakes that I make, all the ways in which I could be better. Like I clearly see all the ways in which I could be better, and it's kind of painful because then it's hard to live up to that. So with a higher consciousness comes a higher responsibility, and so I'm feeling the burden of that responsibility, and then I have to adjust my life to that, and I feel like I have to mature myself like really mature as a teacher to rise to the kind of consciousness that I want to ultimately embody. So there's two aspects to this evolution of my teachings going forward that I want to talk about. Aspect number one is refactoring my own models and understanding of reality. So over the last 10 years, I've shared many different models with you about spiritual stuff, personal development stuff, how to be successful and all that kind of stuff. And just in general, my views about reality and how you should think about reality, right? My latest awakenings are so radical that it's forcing me to rethink all of my models and all the ways in which I frame and teach things, and even the way I articulate things to myself. The way I'm thinking about it right now, it's almost like I need an upgrade to the core operating system of my psyche and how I teach and how I model reality. Like I need a new architecture. It's almost like if you think about game engines, you have like Unreal Engine 4, and then you have the next generation, Unreal Engine 5, which is like a whole new leap in rendering and graphics processing and physics and all that kind of stuff, right? It's like a new generation. Like every 10 years, maybe a new game engine comes out that transforms the whole game industry. That's happening right now with Unreal Engine 5. That's coming online. So I feel like almost like I need to go from Unreal Engine 4 in my own mind to Unreal Engine 5 and what that would look like. And that means rethinking some things and framing things in different ways. It's not that all the old stuff is wrong. It's just that it can be made better. It can be solidified. Deeper connections can be made. It can be made higher quality. It can be made more nuanced, more accurate, and it can be deepened. So that's something I'm going to be working on. And aspect number two of the evolution of my teachings is becoming a better role model. So see, I could have the best models and the best explanations of reality. That's one thing. Let's say I get that right. But then what kind of role model am I? That's a separate thing, right? Likewise, you can be a great role model in life for others, but then your actual models of reality, your understanding of reality could be flawed or bad or not as good as it could otherwise be. So both these aspects are important. So this aspect number two, being a better role model, this is perhaps an even greater challenge because I don't really doubt my ability to refactor my models and my understanding of reality. That I'm really good at that. That's sort of like my bread and butter. Being a better role model, that's much more tricky. I need to change my teaching behavior and the delivery to make it more mature and aligned with the highest truth and love. So I need to be teaching from a higher integrity place. I need to be teaching with greater artfulness and more intelligence in order to have the kind of impact that I want to have on people. Now, let me go into some more depth about both point number one and point number two. So back to point number one about refactoring my understanding of my teachings and upgrading my sort of game engine. After some deep awakenings that I've recently had, it's come to my attention that I need to revamp my teachings to make them more solid, more accurate, more direct, to deepen them. Also, it's become very clear to me that I need to go through a process of purging teachings that I picked up from others over the last decade or two, so that all of my understanding of everything that I teach is my own, really comes from myself. Because, I've read hundreds of books, I've gone to many workshops and seminars, and I've looked at many courses, and I've literally tried to integrate hundreds of perspectives from some of the best teachers, masters, gurus, yogis, and experts across many different fields. And I encourage you guys to do that. And that's a very good approach. So I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. You should. But after a certain point, you wake up so deeply that you realize that a lot of that you got from others, even though it was great and useful, it still wasn't really grounded in your own direct experience. And ultimately what you need is to ground everything in your direct experience. And what I've noticed with my deepest awakenings is that I notice more and more of the things that I got from this sort of multi-perspectival approach that I love. More and more the little nuggets that I got here and there, that many of them just aren't true to my direct experience. And so I need to purge all the stuff that's not true to my direct experience and teach from my direct experience. I've actually awoken to a lot of stuff that contradicts and goes way beyond classic non-dual teachings and spirituality. And so it's becoming more and more clear to me all the bullshit and the games and just the limited ways in which spirituality was taught and taught to me. And let that go and invent sort of from the ground up, something fresh, something new. I call this wiping the slate clean. I really want to wipe the slate clean and develop my teachings uniquely based on my own awakenings and experiences, and not be concerned about what other people are teaching or have taught or trying to integrate with them and all that kind of stuff. Just do what I got to do. So I have to shed the old, start from a blank slate. Otherwise, that baggage holds you back. Sort of like, you have an operating system installed on your computer for a long time, for many years. That operating system, over the years, as you use it, it gets clogged up with junk files and old stuff, and some viruses are in there, and some Trojan horse stuff is in there, and some bad programs and stuff's malfunctioning sometimes. I mean, it still all works, but it's not like smooth. It's not as good as installing a totally new OS. Besides which, the new OS you're going to install is going to be like a higher version OS that's going to allow you more features, and it's going to be faster, it's going to have more bandwidth, it's going to have new capabilities that your old one didn't have. So that's kind of like what I'm doing with my own understanding of myself and reality and all these teachings. These sort of ancient foundations that you start life with, they get old and they start to hold you back. And so once in a while, you have to just sit down and say, okay, like maybe once every 10 years, you sit down and say, okay, I'm just going to wipe the whole slate clean, throw away all of the old teachings, all the beliefs, all the stuff, that just like throw it all away and let me just start from scratch. That's a really good principle to adopt if you can adopt it. Maybe once every 10 years, do that. Wipe the slate clean and rebuild anew. Because those crummy old foundations, they get rotted out. And then you're stuck with that. And then you're building on that rotten foundation. And after a certain point, you can only build so high on that rotten foundation. You got to go back and redo the foundation so you can build higher. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that you throw away everything you learned. It's not like I'm telling you to forget everything you learned. You couldn't do that anyways. You're not going to forget it all. It's sort of like a mental exercise you do where you kind of wipe the slate clean, and then, of course, you never forget the stuff you really learned. Mostly what you're throwing away is theories, hearsay, beliefs, stuff that wasn't in your direct experience. The stuff that's in your direct experience, that's mostly going to stay with you. Those insights, those life lessons, those experiences, those aren't going away. I want to purge my understanding of reality of all human ideas that I acquired along the way towards awakening. Really, the way that humans make sense of reality is incredibly problematic because it's very human-centric and human-biased. It's all about being human, surviving as a human, doing human things and human ways of looking at the world in order to act human. That's fine for being human, but then when you transcend being human and you realize you're not human and you want to go beyond being human, then you got to shed all those ways that humans traditionally make sense of reality. Those ideas were necessary to get you this far, but now you need to let them go and operate from direct experience and from things that transcend humanity as much as possible. At least that's what I'll be doing for myself. Now, there's a concern here when you're doing this is that you're going to seem like you're contradicting yourself. And you guys might think that I'm starting to contradict myself. And, in a certain sense, my teachings do contradict themselves. And the reason that is because my teachings were always about my own evolution. And so when you're evolving and growing, you basically have sort of a choice. You can be consistent and stay the same, or you can be inconsistent and evolve. When a caterpillar is turning into a butterfly, it's contradicting itself. Right? It can't stay a caterpillar and turn into a butterfly. It has that has to die. It has to change. It has to admit that its old form was inferior and that there's a superior form that it needs to evolve to. And that's all part of the growth process. So you might notice that some of the things I talk about in the future are going to contradict things I've said in the past. And you might wonder, well, why is that? Well, because I'm evolving. And the reality is that reality is such a complex thing that there's no way that you can be born and just nail it on your first try. What's going to happen is you're going to make many, many mistakes in making sense of reality, modeling reality, many, many self-deceptions, many mistakes. And you need to adopt an attitude of admitting those as soon as possible and then correcting yourself, even if that means that you're going to contradict yourself. It's better to contradict yourself than to be wrong for the rest of your life and yet be consistent. Don't fall into this trap of sort of a foolish, naive consistency. What you want is evolution. And really, ideally, what you want is that every year when you look back upon your life, you want to be saying, my God, how stupid I was the year before. And how stupid I was the year before that. And you want to be doing that every year. This means you're growing. And I really feel that. Like when I look back at my episodes that were done 5 years ago, I cringe. Like it's cringeworthy. The things I said and how I behave are cringeworthy. And that just shows how much I've grown. Because if I look back at my old episodes from 5 years ago, I'd be like, yeah, that's awesome. That means I wouldn't have grown. You see? So the lesson here for you is that this isn't just happening to me. This is also going to happen to you if you're growing along with me. Your understanding will significantly ripen and solidify and change over time. And you need to be comfortable with that. Your friends, your family might think you're inconsistent. Your students, your clients might think you're being inconsistent. But actually what you are is you're growing. The mind loves to invent narratives and construct sense-making. And then as you awaken and you do this deconstruction work that we do here, you become more and more aware of your own mental constructs and how your mind is constructing reality. And those constructs then need to be let go, or they need to be changed or upgraded to better constructs. This is what we call construct awareness. Go see my episode called The 9 Stages of Ego Development, especially part 3, where we talk about construct awareness. So I'm becoming painfully aware of construct awareness at this point. Like it's really bad. See, to be able to teach these things, I have to construct mental constructs to give to you. And they're useful, they're like training wheels, but these mental constructs then become their own limits. And they also need to be transcended and upgraded to better constructs and so on. And so this will be happening going forward. I will be inventing better mental constructs going forward, upgrading the old ones, right? So you never want to cling to your mental constructs too much. You want to always remind yourself that, oh, this model here or this explanation of something there, this is a mental construct. It's not absolute truth. Therefore, we can always adjust it, improve it, throw it away, find something new, etc. So yeah, mental constructs can contradict and conflict with each other as you grow over time. And the narratives you create also will require retooling as you develop. And your mind basically operates on narratives. What you have of reality is not absolute truth. What you have is you have a bunch of narratives. And these narratives are biased, limited, finite, short-sighted. They're only as good as how much experience you've had, how awake you've become, what states of consciousness you've accessed, what kind of information you've fed into your mind, what kind of perspectives you've heard of and haven't heard of yet. As you hear more perspectives, your narratives will change. As you acquire more life experience, your narratives will change. As you awaken deeper, your narratives will change. And honestly, it's been very challenging to figure out how to talk and teach my deepest awakenings. There's little precedent for how to do that. And I'm unsatisfied with the way that most spiritual teachers, teachings, and schools have done that in the past. So I have to invent my own way going forward. And there's no roadmap for that. It has to just be invented as we go along. And as you're inventing stuff, you're kind of experimenting. You might come up with one model, one example, one mental construct. It might be great, or maybe it's going to be something else. You'll find something else better next year. That's how I tend to find it works for me. So that process will be continuing. Now, on to point number 2, which is about the character development aspect of my teachings. So I noticed that after about 10 years of doing this YouTube stuff, I've had a lot of success. I've been happy with that. But I've also, the success has made me grow somewhat complacent, self-absorbed, and insensitive. The grind of putting out the content every week, the routine of it. I'm very sensitive to routines because I'm a very creative person, so I can get stuck in a routine, and then that robs me of my creativity. And so, as they say, power corrupts, and I'm not immune to corruption. So I always have to keep an eye on how am I being corrupted by my audience, trying to please them on YouTube, just by the grind of putting out consistent content, the potential for money and fame and status, all this kinds of stuff. There's a lot of ways you can get corrupted as a teacher. And so I've been thinking about that. I've been really reflecting on the impact that my work has on others, how I perform and behave as a teacher. I'm becoming a lot more self-aware of the impact that my work has on people. And actually, that's not something that's obvious. It's not obvious because I'm so deep in the work that I'm too close to it, and it's hard for me to have an objective sense of how the work actually impacts others. And especially through an online medium, the majority of people who my work impacts, I don't ever speak to them. I don't ever see them. And so I'm just sort of guessing. And a lot of times I'm guessing based on comments that I get, but the comments that I get, the emails, the feedback, that kind of stuff, that's not an objective representation of the impact that my work has on people, because there's like disproportionate amount of trolling or disproportionate amount of ass kissing, both in the positive and negative direction. It's distorted, right? So the majority of the impact that I have on others, I never get feedback for. So I have to just sort of guess. And those guesses can be wrong. And over the last 10 years, I've been looking at that and thinking about what my impact is. And as my impact has grown, I recognize that I have a lot of positive impact on people. I also realize that these teachings can be dangerous, they can be misused, and that there's some negative impact that I have on people. I'm painfully self-aware of the immaturity and corruption in my teachings. It's not that hard to see it. What's hard to do is to change one's behaviors and entire character to get rid of those, right? That's not something you can just, that's not fixed just by seeing it. That requires years of like reprogramming work. So I want to clean that up. I'm painfully aware of how people use me as a role model for their behavior. That's one thing that I've really noticed and become very sensitive to. Every word that I say, Every action that I take, thousands of people watch me, look up to me, and then they try to emulate me because human beings were just like monkeys. And I notice myself doing that with teachers that I look up to. Everything they do, everything they say, I just, instinctively want to emulate like a monkey. And I notice that, for example, every time that I say fuck, someone's going to think, oh, Leo says fuck a lot, therefore it's good for me to say fuck a lot. Or every time that I criticize or judge somebody, somebody in the audience is going to think that it's a good idea to judge and criticize people. Or every time that I act a little bit closed-minded in some capacity or fashion, somebody else is going to act that way. Or every time that I act in an unloving way, somebody else is going to copy that. So that's something I want to improve. I recognize that I have been very lucky to get this public voice with significant reach on this YouTube platform, which most people will never get. I'm very grateful for that opportunity. And I understand that I have a responsibility to use my voice and this platform in the name of consciousness, selflessness, and love. And this needs to be modeled, not just spoken of, but actually embodied and modeled. This means leading by example. This means not just talking consciousness, selflessness, and love, but doing it, showing it, and all the little behaviors, little micro behaviors that express or exhibit that need to be aligned and made correct. And what's funny is you would think like, oh, well, if you're just, awake or you have a bunch of awakenings or enlightenment, then all that stuff will just auto-correct itself, right? And the answer is no, it won't. That stuff, getting all little micro stuff, little micro behaviors into place, that requires a lot of additional training and programming. That's not just going to happen automatically. Now, to some degree, some of it will automatically improve and correct, and that has happened for me over the years. But then to really get it down right is going to require a lot of training, which is what I'm committing to here. I really want to model and embody spiral dynamics tier 2 cognition, not just at the intellectual level, but also in my tone, in my delivery, and in my style. I feel I could improve in that department still. I want to be a better leader. I want to show and demonstrate what conscious leadership looks like. So I'm going to be working on that a lot. And actually the next episode that I'm going to release is going to be a demonstration of what conscious leadership looks like. We'll get to that next week, hopefully. I've been thinking a lot about what it means to be a conscious leader, a good leader, because in history we see so many bad leaders. And we don't even need to go back deep into history. We could just look at current times, current news, current events. We have so many bad leaders behaving in various devilish ways. And so I want to make sure that I'm not modeling that, and instead modeling the other possibility, which is conscious leadership, which is rarely found out there. There are conscious leaders out there, but they're not explicit about it all the time because they're usually doing something else. They're not teaching you how to be a conscious leader or why you should be a conscious leader. And also, it's just rare. It's just rare to find this. I'll have an episode in the future about conscious leadership. That will be a very important episode. I want to be a better cheerleader for the highest potential that I know there is in you. That's ultimately what my leadership will boil down to. And being a good leader, a conscious leader, is hard because it takes a lot of responsibility and selflessness. That's why it's so rare. And frankly, it's a responsibility that I never really signed up for. I never wanted it. The way I began Actualize.org, I didn't think to myself, oh, I want to be this conscious leader and that a bunch of people will look up to me, right? Like, I didn't start that way. All I thought when I was starting Actualize.org was just like, I want to release cool insights that I know there are about how to develop yourself and how to create an amazing life. There's all these amazing insights and concepts that I feel are not getting enough spotlight in the news and in the culture and in the media. And so I want to create this catalog of cool insights and concepts that can help you to live a deep life. I didn't realize it that at that time that I would have to, like, how deeply I would have to embody those and where they would ultimately lead me towards, and how much responsibility would come with that, which now I'm much more aware of, because now I'm, 10 years later, I'm much more conscious. I had no idea really where this was going. I sort of intuited that it was going in a powerful direction, but I didn't realize how powerful, and I didn't realize the responsibility it would take from me. But now, at the level that I'm at now, in my consciousness, this sort of, shirking of responsibility, or not knowing about the responsibility that I have, this can no longer fly. Things are not going to be so simple as just having a catalog of cool insights and concepts for people. It's way deeper than that now. So rather than shirk my responsibility, I want to accept this responsibility. I want to put it to best use and set the best example that I can. I have a responsibility to use my influence and platform to model the highest levels of personal development, which is what I'll be doing going forward. I'm painfully aware of the ego laced throughout my past teachings, but also it couldn't be otherwise. See? Because in this work, I didn't start out awake. I didn't start out enlightened. I didn't start out God realized. That's like the end of the path. It's not the beginning of the path. So what makes it so difficult is that you start from a place of deep ego, and then you work and work and work your way slowly out of that. But regardless, I'm not using that as an excuse. I want to take as much ego out of my teachings as possible. I want to remove as much noise from the signal that I'm communicating. And that's an important concept. Noise versus signal. We'll be talking more about that in the future. And I want to do that so that my teachings are pure for posterity. One of the things that pains me the most is when I look at one of my old videos and I can see the beauty and the brilliance, the insight, the intelligence in the teaching. But I can also very clearly see the noise, the corruption, the ego. And it's like having a beautiful painting. Like, imagine a Mona Lisa painting or something by Picasso hanging in a museum with like ketchup splattered over it. Dirt stuck to it. That's what I feel like my past teachings are like. And that really doesn't sit well with me. And I also, though, know that it couldn't be otherwise, so I'm not going to be too harsh on myself. I can only do as good as I can. I can only create work up to my level of consciousness and my level of development. I can't go beyond that unless I raise my consciousness more and develop more, which I'm going to be doing. So it's all fine. It's all good. But like going forward, when I think about my work and the legacy that I want to leave behind, I want to get to a point where my work is very like clean, very pure, spotless. And so that requires a lot of work that I need to do on myself. Now, you might be thinking, but Leo, if you're admitting that you make mistakes and that you're corrupt and all this kind of stuff, then why should I listen to you? Because you're not reliable. Here's the thing, though, is that every public intellectual that you would listen to will make mistakes. In fact, most of the public intellectuals out there say some very stupid things. They say some very egotistical things, and many of them are very corrupt without even realizing it. Most public intellectuals have deep flaws in their worldview, and they're so stubborn about it that they're never going to change. They're going to keep those flaws in their worldview for the next 20, 30, 40 years. They're going to go to their grave still maintaining their ideology and their flaws. I don't want to be one of those. Most public intellectuals are deeply biased and self-deceived. I don't want to be one of those. Many spiritual teachings and teachers are limited, biased, and very partial. I don't want to be one of those. So this is my effort to correct that, to preempt that in the future. In a sense, it's good that my teachings are not perfect because actually it forces you to work on yourself. Now, that might sound like an excuse. It's not an excuse. I'm going to try to make my teachings as good as I can make them. But I've actually been thinking about this and kind of wondering, like, let's say I'm able to make my teachings just perfect and spotless. Is that even going to be a net positive for people? Because if even I reach that point, by the time I reach that point, people are going to be so in awe of the teachings and are going to be so enraptured by that they're going to stop thinking for themselves. When you have teachings like that, you stop thinking for yourself and you offload the responsibility just onto the teachings. The teachings become the next dogma. It becomes the next Bible. It becomes the next Quran sort of thing. And I was actually thinking about this, like, how good would it be if in the beginning of the Bible, the very first page of the Bible, it said something like this: this book contains many important truths. However, we have deliberately sprinkled in 10% falsehood into these pages. 10% of the information in this whole book is complete horseshit. You figure out which 10% are horseshit and which 90% are the gold. That's on you. Use your critical thinking skills to figure it out. This was done by design so that you don't turn this into a blind dogma. Imagine if that was the first page of the Bible or the first page of the Quran. That would be the most important page in the Bible and the Quran. It would completely change how people take those books and those teachings and that wisdom. I call this the poison pill strategy. I've actually deliberately thought about, in the future, placing poison pills into my videos, deliberate falsehood, literally telling you false things on purpose that I know are false, maybe up to 10% worth, so that, and then informing you of that, so that you be forced to think for yourself and to verify these teachings for yourself, right? This would be like a safety measure against these teachings being turned into a dogma, because that was my number one concern when I started all this, and still is to this day. It's like people turn this stuff into a dogma. They don't really think about it critically, and that's very dangerous. So maybe in the future, I'll put some poison pills in there. But, I've been fortunate that since I'm not perfect, I don't need to deliberately put poison pills into my teachings. Throughout my old teachings, you'll find things that I said that were mistakes or that were wrong or that were corrupt. You'll find that. I would say probably maybe 5 to 10% of my teachings, just naturally, just given my level of consciousness, ego, and development when I created those videos, 5 to 10% are wrong. And you might say, well, Leo, then why would I follow your teachings then? Well, good luck finding some teachings that are 100% unbiased, 100% impartial, 100% free of corruption and ego. Good luck finding such a teacher or such a set of teachings. And even if you do, you're going to start to worship that teaching so much that you're going to turn it into a dogma, and then what'll happen? You're not actually going to be embodying those teachings. So very realistically, how can you expect any human teacher to be perfect? Like, think about this. This is a silly and dangerous expectation. Be careful that you don't expect too much from your spiritual teachers. The point is not to fall in love with your spiritual teacher. The point is to take the hints, the pointers, the nuggets, and apply it to your own life. And then to rise to the level, to a level that your spiritual teacher was at, or even beyond your spiritual teacher. That's the point, right? It's not to worship the teacher. Speaking of being a spiritual teacher, I've had to bootstrap myself as a spiritual teacher. Nobody licensed me. Nobody ordained me. Nobody taught me how to lead or how to teach. No one taught me how to talk about God or how to model God, truth, love, selflessness, consciousness. I had to figure this stuff out along the way as I struggled through it. You have to understand that when I started Actualized.org, let me think. When I started it, I knew about the concept of enlightenment, but I had never experienced it yet. And I didn't even talk about it at that point. When I started Actualized.org, I didn't talk about enlightenment. I vaguely knew about it, and I knew that I would be going in that direction, but like I had no idea where it was really going to lead. I knew it was going to lead to good things, but like I had no idea really. So like there was so much evolution. A lot of my work is documenting in a sort of implicit way. It's documenting my own evolution. And of course, it's showing you what your evolution would look like as well. The evolution that you go through just from learning about, let's say you get into self-help, then through self-help, after a few years of doing that, maybe 5 years of self-help and success type of basic stuff, then finally you learn about spirituality. Then you start kind of like sniffing around the spiritual field, and then you try a little thing here or there. You do a little meditation, you do a little bit of a retreat here or there, do a workshop, whatever, watch a few videos. Then you get more serious about it. This whole evolutionary process, it's going to be very messy, very chaotic. You're going to have a lot of wrong ideas about how all of it works. You're going to have silly and stupid expectations. You're going to trick yourself and fool yourself. Your first awakening, you're going to think, oh my God, I've awoken fully and all this. And then you're going to realize that you were just kidding yourself, right? And this would just go on and on and on and on. And you'll fall into all sorts of spiritual traps along the way. It's a messy process. And so what's been happening with my work is that I've been building the airplane as we've been taking off the runway. You don't start off life with a fully built, perfect airplane. You have to assemble it as you're taking off, and there's a horde of barbarians chasing you. So if you don't take off, they're going to get you. That's kind of like our situation here. And I've had to do this with plenty of ego obstructing and being in the way. What matters when it comes to spiritual teachings, or any teachings basically, or really any information content that you consume online, is what matters is the signal to noise ratio. I'm going to have a whole episode on just signal to noise ratio. But basically, you want to stop thinking of teachings as either right or wrong, good or bad. And you want to start distinguishing what is the signal and what is the noise in the teaching. So I would say that my teachings have a lot of signal in them. The signal is the good stuff. It's the pure stuff. The noise is the corruption. It's the ego. So I would say that my teachings have like 90 to 95% signal and maybe 5 to 10% noise. That's pretty good considering, what's out there these days online. A lot of the stuff you find online is like, 50% signal, 50% noise, or even worse, like sometimes you get 90% noise and like 10% signal. So start thinking of teachings in that respect. Now, what causes noise in my teachings? Fundamentally, it just boils down to my own lack of consciousness. My selfishness, my biases, my ego, my limited life experience, my youth and immaturity, my arrogance, my cravings, my bad habits that I've picked up over the years. Basically, all of that. My ignorance. And this goes for any teacher or any media you consume out there. Basically, that's what the noise is. The less consciousness you have, the more selfish you are, the more bias you have, the more ego you have, the less life experience you have, the fewer perspectives you've experienced and contemplated and come in contact with, the more arrogant you are, the more cravings you have, the more bad habits you have, the noisier the teaching will be. The only way to learn from life is to make mistakes, really. So you have to be willing to admit your mistakes and to forgive yourself for them. So even though I recognize various mistakes that I've made in my delivery of these teachings, I also don't beat myself up over it or feel too guilty about it, because I realize that really it couldn't be otherwise, right? There's always stuff I'm not conscious of. Like I've said in the past, I'm never immune to self-deception. I always have to be vigilant about that. I'm not immune to corruption either. And so it's a messy process, and you just got to you can't be perfectionistic about it. You got to do the best you can do. And allow yourself to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. What's not okay is to make the same mistake over and over and over again for years and for decades and to not change. So I don't want to do that. So I allow myself to make mistakes, but then I want to learn quickly from my mistakes. And that's what this episode is about. And even though I say all this, going forward in the future, I still reserve the right to be wrong and to make mistakes. And I still don't hold myself as immune to self-deception or to corruption. All of that stuff will be operative for the rest of my life. I never expect to be immune to those things. I can get better and better at them as I become more conscious. I can become better at avoiding that corruption and that noise. But it's never going to be perfect. And so you have to set your expectations realistically. Don't expect perfection from me, and don't expect perfection from yourself, and don't expect perfection from your gurus. I want to speak a little bit about arrogance. I'm aware that I come across as arrogant sometimes, and that's because I am arrogant. And that's something I want to improve on going forward. But also I was thinking to myself, why am I arrogant? Where does this arrogance come from? And I kind of looked through my life and looked for it. And basically, I've always been arrogant. Since a teen, it was there. And I was asking myself, why? Why is that arrogance there? For me, the arrogance has been a tool that I use to actually cut through the bullshit. There's so much bullshit in society. So much bullshit from teachers, professors, philosophers that I've read, friends that I've talked to, in business and marketing, within religion, within science, online from public intellectuals. There's so much bullshit out there that basically I've used arrogance as a weapon to cut through the bullshit. Basically, the way I've used arrogance is it's you're not going to tell me what to believe. I'm not just going to adopt your perspective or your worldview. I'm going to hold my worldview as sovereign. And I'm really going to stay true to what makes sense for me. I'm going to stay true to my intuition and to my direct experience. And so from that came this arrogance. And also because I've been extremely ambitious since I was young. And my ambition and my vision for what I knew was possible in my own life and life in general for others, what can be made out of life. I saw people living such mediocre lives and making such small things out of their lives and getting stuck on such petty human bullshit that for me, that ambition coupled with a real honoring of my own sovereignty, of my own creativity, of my own intellect, led me to this arrogance. And it's funny because you would think that arrogance, is very anti-spiritual. Traditionally that's true. But actually this arrogance is this arrogance coupled with this ambition is the thing that ultimately allowed me to punch through all of the bullshit out there within science, within religion, within philosophy, within, politics, within business, within marketing, within relationships, within all of that, to cut through all of that and ultimately get to absolute truth. Now, I'm not saying this in order to justify continuing arrogance going forward. I'm just sort of explaining, the deep psychology behind it. In a certain sense, I'm very grateful for it. Because you need that, because the reason you you have to really be able to respect your own intellectual autonomy and sovereignty. Because in the end, to reach absolute truth, you have to do it through your own direct experience. You can't do it by trusting somebody, believing some spiritual guru. And so my arrogance has allowed me to stay intellectually independent from everybody else, right? I never adopted a guru. And the reason that is because I was too arrogant. I never subscribed to any spiritual school like Buddhism or Hinduism or Vedanta because I was too arrogant. I never believed any spiritual teacher too much. I never put any spiritual teacher on any kind of pedestal and thought of them as perfect. I never kissed their ass. And in that respect, it was perfect. It was exactly what I needed to get me to the highest levels of awakening. But also, of course, I realize the obnoxiousness of it. I realize the corruption it creates within my teachings and my manner. I realize how it rubs people the wrong way, turns people off. It's not the most intelligent and artful way to teach. And this is not a kind of behavior that I want to model for others to emulate. Although maintaining your intellectual sovereignty is something that's very important. So I'm just, sharing some insights I had about my own character flaws here. Again, this is not an excuse. It's something that I definitely want to correct going forward as my teachings mature. Another point that I want to address is exaggeration. I've noticed that I'm prone to exaggeration. And I was asking myself, why? Because otherwise, I'm very interested in truth. But then if I'm exaggerating on some point, then that's it's taking the truth into the falsehood. And I started asking myself, why does that happen to me? Why do I have this character defect? And then I realized that the reason I exaggerate is because when I'm communicating, what I'm trying to communicate is not the letter of the law, so to speak, but the spirit of the law. Sometimes I exaggerate a point because I'm trying to be true to the spirit or essence of a thing, the emotional impact of a thing, rather than its technical accuracy. I'm trying to get across the emotional significance of something. That's more important in the big picture. Because what I've always resented and disliked about some teachers and teachings is when they understate things, like something huge like awakening. They just say it in a very sort of it's a false humility. This sort of false humility, understating it. It's oh, it's no big deal. It's it's just a little thing. It's just ordinary. It's no, it's not ordinary. It's the most radical thing you could possibly imagine, right? So when I speak about awakening, sometimes it seems like I'm exaggerating something when I'm speaking. I'm actually doing that deliberately. I'm doing that to communicate its emotional significance to you. And to me, that's more important than technical accuracy. Honestly, I don't really care about technical accuracy very much. And you can find technical inaccuracies in things that I've taught in the past, and you'll probably find stuff that I teach in the future. And the reason it's never bothered me or never cared about it very much is because, look, here's the problem, is that I noticed early on in academia that a lot of academics are so focused on technical accuracy that they have perfect technical accuracy. But in the end, everything they're teaching, everything they're studying is deeply, deeply partial, narrow, and will never lead you to absolute truth. And so there's this funny trap that you can fall into where you're so academic that you're technically accurate on anything. You're technically accurate on everything that you talk about, but in the end, you're fundamentally, epistemologically and metaphysically and spiritually ignorant. You have no idea what's really going on, and nor will you ever. You will never awaken, because awakening is not about technical accuracy. And so it's actually possible to lie and to deceive yourself and others through technical accuracy, because you create this veneer of, oh, look, I've got everything. It's all technically accurate. It's all scientific. Like all the numbers add up. All the logic is perfect. And even though that's true, maybe, you're missing the bigger picture. The bigger picture is always more important than technical accuracy. You can always lie with statistics, with numbers. You can always deceive. This is the thing that many logicians and academic types don't understand. It's way too narrow of a way to conceive of reality, to try to understand reality. And also the sort of academic style where, in academia, it's frowned upon to exaggerate, and it's frowned upon to stress the emotional significance of a thing. Like, for example, if you discover some great important new discovery within science, the culture of science teaches you, or the culture of academia, is to like report it in the most driest, technical, sort of objective way possible, in the most like neutral way possible, such that when people read your discovery, their eyes glaze over. But the problem is that when that happens, people read the discovery, they don't understand the significance of the discovery. It doesn't really touch them. It doesn't move them. The spirit of it doesn't hit them. This is a critique I've had of academia for a long time in my own mind. And so with my work, I deliberately try not to do that. I deliberately try not to get lost in technical minutia or to win technical arguments or debates, or to overwhelm you with data and facts and studies, because you can easily lie with data, facts, and studies. You can find a study that will lead you to come to conclusions that are exactly the opposite of what's true. So then what good are your studies? What good is your logic? What good is your data? What good are your proofs? When they can be so easily recontextualized, undermined, and flipped upside down. So again, this is not an excuse for exaggeration. Sometimes I take the exaggeration too far. But actually, sometimes I don't exaggerate enough. For example, when I speak about awakening, when I speak about the highest God realization is so good that your human mind cannot imagine that level of goodness. Any level of goodness that you imagine, the highest God realization is infinitely more good than that. And it might seem like I'm exaggerating, but actually I'm not. That's actually the most accurate way to describe the highest God realization. It's absolute good. It's infinite good. You can't conceive of such a good. It's not possible. And if you ever reach that, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But it might seem like I'm exaggerating. And sometimes I do just exaggerate something a little bit, here or there. I do value accuracy. I do want to be accurate and precise in the way that I speak about the things I speak about. But also, I want to stay true to communicating the emotional significance of things. Like when speaking about awakening, for example, I hate it when teachers do not communicate the emotional significance of it, how radical it is, when they downplay it. I feel like this is such a disservice to students. Now, sometimes I can't tell, are they doing it because they actually haven't had the highest awakening, therefore they don't understand its significance and radicalness? With some people, it's like that. With other people, I think they have had it, but then they feel like they just have to like really play it down, this sort of false humility. But this is not accurate, actually. When something is deeply emotionally significant, to communicate it without equal emotional significance is actually a lie. To say that God realization or awakening is ordinary is a lie. It's not ordinary. There's nothing ordinary about it. And to feed that idea into students' minds, to me, this is a deep disservice to students. So this point about exaggeration is a little tricky. You can go wrong in both directions. You can become arrogant and overly exaggerating certain things, but you can also take it in the other direction where you're too humble and you understate things. So here's a list of the aspects of my teachings that I want to improve very specifically. First, I want to change the tone of how I teach to be more solid and more what I call tier 2 cognition. See my episode, Spiral Dynamic Stage Yellow, for more on that. I feel like I'm very well grounded in tier 2, but I feel like my tone oftentimes comes off as tier 1. So it's a tonal shift. It's not that I think in tier 2 all the time, but I don't always speak in tier 2. I can get better at that. Speaking of speaking, the next point is I want to be more careful with my use of language. I want to be more precise with my use of language. That's something I want to work on more. The next point is I want to be less arrogant, less talking down, less finger wagging, less self-righteousness, and less shaming. I use a lot of shaming techniques, if you haven't noticed. Now, for some people, it works great. For a certain level of consciousness, shaming it works really well. But then for a higher level of consciousness, shaming might actually scare those people off. So I'm cognizant of that, and I want to improve on that. Along with that is less ridicule, less belittling, and more accepting of people and intellectual positions and so forth. I tend to ridicule a lot. Again, ridicule can be a powerful weapon, but it can also be taken too far. It can turn people off too. So I'm more cognizant of how the manner in which I communicate these teachings turn some people off. And I want to correct that. So a lot of this list is about that. The next point is I want to be more careful with judgment and criticism. Because anytime I express judgment or criticism, I'm out of alignment with truth and love, and also I'm modeling that out of alignmentness with you, and then people then get infected with that judgment and that criticism, and then they become judgmental and critical. That's a problem. So I need to correct that. The next point is I want to exhibit more respect for my audience, be less dismissing of them, more respect for your sovereignty. More assuming a highly intelligent audience. Sometimes I fall into the trap of assuming that my audience is dumb. Now, this is tricky because, again, actually, if we're going to be technically accurate, the majority of my audience is dumb. I'm not saying that as a judgment or a criticism or belittling people. That's just the case. The majority of mankind is stuck in a profound ignorance. That's just the dark ages that mankind is in right now. We're in a profound ignorance collectively. So it's tricky. So do I speak in a way where I'm speaking to the lowest common denominator? Because if I randomly just make an assumption about who's listening to me right now, chances are it's an ignorant person. Sorry, But I also recognize that a lot of you who are listening are very intelligent. And when I speak as though everybody who's watching me is ignorant, that does a disservice to those of you who are very intelligent. And by definition, if you're a fan of my work and you watch a lot of these episodes, then you're way more intelligent on average than most people. And I want to honor and respect that in you. And I want to encourage more of that intelligence in you. So it's a little tricky to get this balance right. Because here's the other problem. If I speak assuming high intelligence on everybody who's listening to me, that's also a problem. Because you might say, well, Leo, why don't you just be magnanimous and just assume that everybody who listens to you is very, very intelligent? But if I assume that, then the way in which I teach for highly intelligent people, you see, the problem is that if in reality a lot of ignorant people are watching me, they're going to easily misinterpret the intelligent things that I say to those intelligent people that I'm assuming they are, and then they're going to do very unintelligent things with those intelligent insights. For example, when in my mind I picture that somebody who's listening to me is stupid, I have to issue a lot more warnings for the things that I say. For example, if I'm talking about psychedelics to highly intelligent people, I have to qualify a lot less of what I say. But if I assume that, some 18-year-old moron is listening to what I'm saying about psychedelics, then I have to say, okay, look, be careful with psychedelics. Make sure you're careful with your dosing. Make sure you don't get yourself into legal trouble. Make sure that you don't, do it when you're on a balcony so you don't jump out of a window. Make sure you don't jump off a bridge. Make sure that you don't kill yourself. Don't make sure that you don't have a loaded gun near you, right? To explain all these things to a highly intelligent person is insulting that person's intelligence, because he would think, Leo, that's so obvious. Why are you wasting time on this? You're wasting my time. But the reality is that many people who watch, thousands of people who watch this stuff, are not intelligent enough to understand all those basic things. So it's not so simple. Just assuming that your audience is highly intelligent just because you want to be magnanimous and generous, this is not necessarily in their benefit. Really, what's necessary is an accurate picture of your audience. And part of the problem is that I don't know the full breakdown of the intelligence of my audience. Some of my audience is very, very intelligent. Some is not. And I'm not sure, the full proportions of it. You might say, well, Leo, then don't assume. But you see, the problem is that when you're teaching and you're speaking to an audience, you do have to make assumptions about your audience. You have to assume what your audience might know and what they might not know. You have to assume what traps they might fall into, which requires assuming their level of experience, their level of wisdom, their level of intelligence, their level of consciousness, their level of development. So sometimes I sort of have a rough idea of what the average level of intelligence or development or consciousness of my audience is, but I could be wrong about that. That's very hard to predict that because we're dealing with these sort of gross averages. How do you really know? I don't have very good feedback on that. And in truth, I probably have a very diverse audience. And then so when you have a very diverse audience from all over the world and different ages, different development levels, different spiral stages, how do you speak to all of them at once? It's hard. It's tricky. But still, I want to improve on that. That's not an excuse. I also want to give more acknowledgement of spiritually advanced listeners. Sometimes I speak as though, you're a spiritual moron. And a lot of people out there are just spiritual morons. That's okay. We all have to start there. But many of you I also know are spiritually advanced, and I want to honor that about you. Also, I want to be less sexist and more friendly, use more female-friendly examples. Sometimes I use overly male-centered examples. Sometimes I say somewhat misogynistic or sexist things. So I want my teachings to be equally accessible to male and female, even though the majority of my audience is predominantly male. 95% of my audience is male. So that's part of the reasons why I use male examples. However, it kind of goes both ways. It's a two-way street because maybe it's because I use so many male examples that most of my audience is male. But honestly, on YouTube, online, the majority of audiences for this kind of content are going to be male. And also just because I have sort of a masculine style of teaching, I have kind of a brash style of teaching, which is going to rub many females the wrong way. But hey, those of you females who are into that, thanks for sticking around. I appreciate you. I also want to be less heteronormative. Sometimes I use examples that kind of exclude LGBTQ people. So I'm becoming more sensitive to that. I can improve on that. Sometimes I use heterosexual examples rather than homosexual examples, stuff like that. Or I just sort of assume that the audience is heterosexual, which is generally true, but not always true. The next point is I want to aim for more technical accuracy, more precision. I can improve on that. Less exaggeration, as I've talked about. I want to be more professional in my style, in my manner. I want to use less profanity and less vulgar examples. Sometimes in the past, I've taken that overboard. I've been trying to dial that back, and I will continue dialing that back going forward. I want to be less pushy with my worldview and my agenda. Because there's sort of like a reverse psychology thing going on. The more pushy I get with enlightenment or with God, then the more resistance you're going to have to it. So I have to like pull that back. Sometimes I'm a little too pushy with that stuff. And that can turn people off. It can give kind of a tier 1 flavor to the teachings rather than the tier 2 flavor that I want. A lot of this stuff is kind of stylistic. It's more style than substance. But style is important because people who come to these teachings, within 5 seconds, they make a judgment about me, about my style, about the way that I teach, the language that I use. And so that turns people off, and I don't like that. Obviously, I want to be more compassionate and more loving going forward in these teachings. That's very sort of love. That's very general. A general thrust of improving my teachings is they're just going to be more loving going forward. I want to be more inspiring, more hopeful, and more encouraging. Sometimes I feel like I'm not encouraging enough, like I'm maybe being a little bit too realistic on you, or a little bit almost like too harsh or too pessimistic without really encouragement. I can do a lot better at encouraging you. You're gonna notice that in future teachings. I want more recognition of the God in you that you don't yet see in yourself. So I want to recognize that more in you. I want to treat you like you're God, but you don't yet realize that about yourself, as opposed to treating you as just some stupid human, some monkey. Less straw man objections. Sometimes when I pose these sort of like, but Leo, sort of objections to my own arguments and to my own teachings, those objections, sometimes they're a little too ridiculous. They're not like the strongest. Like, I want to rack my mind to come up with strong objections to the things that I teach, and then so that I can address those better. Less reactivity to criticism of my work. Sometimes in the past, I've gotten hung up on, people criticizing, trolling me, and then I would kind of get like triggered or reactive into that. I've gotten a lot better at avoiding that. And in the future, that's I'm going to completely eliminate the kind of reactivity towards criticism of my work. Because that creates a lot of drama and distraction, and it just makes me look bad. And honestly, at this point, I've stopped caring. I've almost stopped caring about criticism of my work. Not completely, but especially all the trolling type of stuff and the sort of silly objections and critiques. I just want to let people do that and just not care and not be reactive at all. Basically, the lesson when it comes to criticism, if you're a public intellectual or something, is just just don't be reactive. Just ignore it and just do your work. And that's what I want to focus on, just doing my work, doing the best that I can. And the criticism, it's all irrelevant. I want to make less absolutistic statements. Rather than saying stuff like every and all, say instead most or many. Like, rather than saying that, something like all women love players, rather than saying that, say that many women love players. That's a more accurate way to say it, right? Or rather than saying that all men will say anything to get laid, rather than saying that, it's better to say most men will say anything to get laid. That's more accurate, right? Rather than saying that all politicians are devils, it's better to say most politicians are devils. More accurate. I want to be more generous with giving credit to other teachers and people who inspire me with insights. A lot of times I'll listen to some teacher about this or that, and then that triggers an insight in me. I should give more credit to those sources where I get insights and inspiration from. I also want to be less critical of other teachers and public intellectuals and very careful not to strawman their positions. I've been a bit guilty of that in the past. I want to correct that going forward. I want to be more cautious and issue more disclaimers for the mentally ill. One of the things that I discovered in this work over the last, let's say, 3 or 4 years is just how prevalent mental illness is. Honestly, it's pretty shocking. I didn't realize when I began this work how many mentally ill people are into self-help and spirituality. They're attracted to it like moths to a flame. I didn't realize how much of my audience suffered from mental illness. And honestly, because I've never suffered from mental illness, so to me, this was not really an area of interest. I haven't studied it very much until recently. And so I just assumed it was something rare and that I didn't have to deal with it. But now I understand like that, probably 20% of my audience has some kind of mental illness. And they're in deep suffering and they have a lot of trauma. And this sort of psychotherapeutic stuff, which is really not my forte, it's not really what my teachings are about, but I have to be cognizant of that and I have to adjust my teachings for such people, issue the right disclaimers, otherwise these people can easily abuse these teachings, take them the wrong way. And so, that's something I had to learn just through kind of trial and error. Again, in a certain sense, I was assuming the best about you guys. I was assuming the best about my audience, which was sort of like that. The majority of you are not mentally ill, which is true. The majority of you are not mentally ill. But I was assuming that like 98% of you are not mentally ill. But actually, like maybe only 80% of you are not mentally ill. The rest of you are. And look, I'm not judging you. Like, I totally understand how difficult that is. I feel very grateful that I don't suffer from mental illness and I don't have a lot of deep trauma in my life. Some of you have gone through horrible life situations, childhoods, have been abused in various ways or traumatized. I totally understand that that's valid and that's needs to be treated seriously. But also you should understand that that is not the focus of my work. There are other teachers and therapists and techniques and methods that you can find out there that can help you more with that. That's not my forte. That's not my wheelhouse, even though I can have some profound insights for you on those topics. It's not really something that I'm very passionate about. And the reason that is because I just don't have a lot of experience of that. I have not been around a lot of mentally ill people in my life. In general, I don't tolerate them very well, like in my own personal life. Like I wouldn't be friends with a mentally ill person. No offense to those of you who have it. It's just that I have very high standards, like for the kind of drama that I'm willing to tolerate in my life. I don't allow drama because that drama distracts me from doing the work that I need to do. Right? And one of the biggest problems with this mental illness and this trauma that you have is that like it makes your life so chaotic and so dramatic. You're always in some kind of drama. You're in these whirlwinds of drama that you can't really self-actualize properly. You can't do the work. You can't do the spiritual work because you're always like in some new storm of drama. And I totally understand that that's where you're at. But also, like, to do the kind of high-level work that I do, I can't allow that in my life. So I don't allow that like near me. And as a result, I don't have a lot of experience dealing with that. Now, I totally appreciate other people, teachers and therapists who specifically actually work with that and they want that near them. Like they want to work with mentally ill people and people who are in deep suffering and trauma. That's great. That's a very noble, very, very like incredible life purpose to have is to help those kind of people heal. But don't expect too much of that from me. Like I'm getting better at that, but that's not my forte and that's not my specialty because I'm thinking about much higher stuff than that. So now you understand how that works. The next point is I want to be more concise, shorter, and more direct and more potent in my teachings. Sometimes I can ramble on too much or give too many examples. In the future, I want to try to like condense stuff down. Sometimes I just go a little bit overboard, and that's because sometimes, I like to hear myself speak too much. I'm going to improve on that going forward. Really, don't judge the quality of my videos by their length. Really judge it by the potency, by the density. It's like how much insight can you pack into as short a time as you can. So if the video is only an hour long, but still manages to pack in 3 hours worth of content and insight into 1 hour, that's a better video than a 3-hour video. So the quality of my videos is not just based on its length. Don't judge it based on that. The next point is I want to be more true to my own direct experience. I already talked about that at the beginning of this video. The next point is I want to be more careful before giving specific advice to people. In general, I've been pretty good about not just, giving too much advice to people, like very concrete advice. But I want to get even better at just saying, I don't know. A lot of times people ask me for advice in their dating life, in their spiritual work, whatever. And the honest answer is a lot of times I don't know. I don't have all the answers for you. A lot of times you have to figure that stuff out yourself. I have general principles I can give you, but that doesn't mean I know what you should be doing specifically in your, life situation, because there's so many details that come into play there. And it also depends on your personality type and what your goals are and your motivations and your strengths and your weaknesses, which vary from person to person. And I don't know that about you. The next point is I want to be more responsible for what I say, less irresponsible with my words, because I'm more sensitive and cognizant of how words can hurt people. Words can be used as a weapon, so I want to be careful about that. I want to be less abrasive, less confrontational, less aggressive. I tended to be more aggressive in my early videos. I think I've softened up a bit. I'm going to soften up more. I want to be more gentle and more kind in my manner. I want to be less opinionated. I want to be more honest and vulnerable, less posturing, less pretense. I struggle with vulnerability sometimes. In certain ways, I can be very vulnerable in these videos. In other ways, I also notice certain pretense that I put on, certain kinds of posturing, and a sort of a phony vulnerability. So that's something I need to work on going forward. I also want to listen to people better and deeper, with less judgment and more charity, especially when they have a significantly different point of view than mine, less dismissive of divergent points of view. This would be modeling more of a tier 2 manner and style. And lastly, I want this work to be less about me and more about the insights, the truths themselves that are being communicated. And not my truths, but just truths. So it's not about me. These really shouldn't be my teachings. These are just insights into the nature of the universe. I don't own these insights. I didn't even generate these insights. The universe generated these insights through me, since I am part of the universe. And I don't really deserve credit for the insights. The insights are universal if they're true. And if they're not true, then what good are they? Now you might say, well, but Leo, it sounds like you're sort of like trying to soften yourself to become more politically correct. And wouldn't that be sort of like selling out to wokeism? Because you don't want to get canceled or something like that. But that's not really my motivation here. Nobody is pressuring me into changing or threatening to cancel me. This is more about me recognizing that I want to be a better role model and a more conscious leader. And to me, when I think about the kind of leader I want to be in 10 years, this list that I just ran off, all these improvements need to be made to my teaching and to my style, tone, and delivery in order to match my own ideals of where I want to be, let's say, in 10 years. Basically, I want to live and teach with higher integrity, and this is what that looks like for me. So I've already been doing this over the last 6 months, but I'm going to be doing it even more as I'm going to be watching myself like a hawk. Any kind of acting out or emotional reactivity, I'm going to be looking for that like a hawk. Just like I'm becoming so aware of my own emotional reactivity to anything. Someone criticizes, it's like, oh, I can like immediately become aware of like, oh, I have some emotional egoic reaction to that criticism. And then I can kind of like, rather than acting on it, just kind of like, cut it off rather than acting from that place. Or I can become aware of like when I'm getting a little self-righteous or arrogant and then kind of like tamp it down rather than acting it out. So this is what happens when you become more conscious. You become more aware of these little subtle, like egoic dynamics that are subtly corrupting all of your expressions and behaviors with all the people around you. Because you're always in this state of emotional reactivity in one way or another. Something is threatening your survival, you get reactive about it. So a lot of what this process of improving myself is going to be in the years to come is just like really carefully watching myself and then cutting off the emotional reactivity and not acting out. Like sometimes I would give myself just carte blanche or license to act out. But then when I do that, I notice a negative impact that it has on my audience, my students, somebody that I'm communicating with that I don't like. And so I realize that I have to become more careful about that. So does all of this mean that my previous teachings are junk now? Should you not go and watch the old stuff? No, that would be a mistake. There's a lot of useful and profound insights in those old videos. Like I said, I consider at least 90% of what I teach to be signal and only 5 to 10% noise. So that's still a pretty good ratio. Also, remember, it all depends on what level you're at. Actually, like for many people who are at the lower levels of the spiral, they will resonate better with teachings that are a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more shaming, a little bit more critical, a little bit more vulgar, and use a little bit more profanity, that kind of stuff, because it meets them at the level that they're at. The most advanced teachings are not necessarily the best for you right now. And also, one of the things that I want you to see, I think one of the most valuable things I can demonstrate to you and teach you is just how much growth happens in this process. There's an evolutionary process that's going on here. And it's one thing to learn from a teacher who's like 70 years old and has gone through the entire evolutionary process, but you saw none of it. All you see is the end result. Some old guy sitting on a chair, like Eckhart Tolle, teaching you about awakening, and you don't see any evolution in him because, he's very old, he's very mature. That's not a criticism of him, great, good. But that can give you a distorted picture of what it's going to be like for you. For a lot of people, it's going to be hard to even resonate with someone like Eckhart Tolle because he's just this like soft-spoken, humble, quiet little, German gnome-looking man sitting on a chair, softly, slowly speaking to you. He's not really kind of like matching the culture you grew up in, the kind of friends that you probably have, the way that your intimate relationships are, the way that your family situation is, where you're yelling at each other, fighting with each other. There's a lot of drama going on. It doesn't match that. And also, when you see him like that, like it's hard for you to connect the dots between where you're at right now, let's say in your 20s or 30s, and where he is in his 70s. It's like, what's going to be the process of getting you to that? What are all the intermediate steps you're going to have to go through? So with me, what you're getting, there's trade-offs, right? I'm not as mature as Eckhart Tolle. Maybe I'm not as emotionally grounded as him or whatever. Maybe I act out more. Maybe I'm more arrogant. Okay, fine. But you have to realize that that's actually kind of like closer to where most people are. And also that's where you're going to be at my age. Most people at my age are going to be at that level or worse. And so what's going to be the process of getting to your highest self, to your most mature self? Well, it's going to look like this process that I'm sharing with you here, and that you're seeing through all of my episodes starting 10 years ago to today and beyond. That's what it looks like. And so if you want to go through that process, you can kind of like see what that's going to entail for you. It's going to entail you going through a similar sort of process that I'm going through here, and all the struggles that come with that. And also a lot of suffering and pain from looking at your own shitty behavior from the past. I mean, that's a lot of what this is. Like, the way you improve yourself is you look back and you realize, oh, that was ugly, and I said this ugly thing, and I did that ugly thing, and I behaved in this weird way. Why did I do this? And why did I say that? It's like, oh my God, I'm ashamed of myself. It's like, it's embarrassing. It's cringy. Yeah, that's growth. That's how you grow. If you don't experience that, then you're going to just stay the same for the rest of your life. You're not going to mature. So it's very important to confront your mistakes, be honest with them, and then forgive yourself for them. Because honestly, you couldn't do better. You can only do as good as you're conscious right now and your stage of development. You can't go beyond that. This shift in my teachings and in my style is going to be subtle at first, so don't expect some, dramatic change starting next week. It's going to be subtle. I'm going to be working on it for the next year and beyond. It's going to grow and develop slowly over time, such that majority of people who watch my stuff won't even notice it, unless you're like a hardcore fan and you've watched 100 episodes. Then you'll start to see it going forward. But, for the average person who just watches a few videos, they're not even going to notice that this is happening, which is why I'm shooting this episode, to explain it to you. I want to make it explicit because I want you to see like the nitty gritty of what personal development looks like. It's not clean. It's hairy, it's messy, it's dirty. A lot of times it's shameful. So that will be happening going forward. Hopefully you'll be able to sense a little bit of it every week, a little bit more every week. And I'll still probably fall into old habits, because those old habits have been ingrained over 10 years of teaching. And it's going to take me some time, to adjust and to change, because the mind and the brain doesn't change overnight. It takes weeks, months, years. These stylistic changes will apply not just to my videos, but also to my posting on the blog and on the forum. It should also be said that learning how to be a good spiritual teacher is something extra beyond just being spiritual. It's one thing to just do spirituality for yourself. It's another thing to then become a role model for spirituality and dealing with, hundreds and thousands of people and leading them. That's an extra step beyond just your basic awakening. So keep that in mind for those of you who are watching who want to become spiritual teachers or who want to be conscious leaders and role models. That's extra. That doesn't come automatically with having your awakening. That's extra work you got to do to be able to be artful at that, developing that skill. Just because you can understand something in your own mind doesn't mean you're great at articulating it or teaching it to others, conveying it to others. That's a separate additional skill you have to develop. And what's going to happen here is that as I succeed in holding myself to this higher standard that I'm setting for myself now, I will also then, after I transition more into that, maybe let's say in a few months and beyond, is I will then hold my audience to that higher standard as well. That's part of the reason that I'm doing this and talking about it. I don't want to just hold myself to a higher standard. I want to hold you to a higher standard, but I want to lead by example. So first I have to do it. Then if I do it, then I feel like I will be in integrity to ask you to do it. What I can't do is ask you to do it before I've done it. That would be out of integrity. So that's why I'm doing this and talking about it. And one of the reasons I'm motivated by this is because it's less even for me than it is for you. It's not so much that I want to enforce the standard on myself as I want to enforce it on you. But to enforce it on you, I have to enforce it on myself. And especially those of you who are on the forum, some of you trolls and bullshitters on the forum who are acting out and being devils. Sometimes I'm a devil on the forum. Social media tends to bring out the devil in us. But those of you who are on the forum acting out, watch out, because my behavior on the forum will improve over the next 6 months, let's say, and then I will be asking for better behavior from all of you as well. I grow fast. That's one of the things that I'm good at. Like, I make plenty of mistakes in my life, but the one advantage I have is that I learn quickly from my mistakes, and I love to change. I recommend you adopt that same attitude. I recommend you make these changes with me so that we grow together. Otherwise, we're going to grow apart. And I'm not going to be waiting for you to catch up. Like, you got to get on it, right? Get on it. Do the work. Do your homework. Grow yourself. Now, hopefully it's obvious to you that even though I've been talking a lot about myself in this episode, making it all about me, actually, all of these lessons apply to you as well. As you go on to be a conscious leader, whether you're a spiritual teacher or not a spiritual teacher, you're going to be in some sort of leadership role going forward, probably, especially if you do this work. You're going to be in a position to be a conscious leader at work, within your family, amongst students, in your relationships, whatever. And all of these lessons and problems will mostly apply to you as well. So really, I'm telling you not just what I'm doing, but what you'll be doing if you're going to go all the way with this work. I've realized recently just how much of a rare privilege I have to model the highest truth, consciousness development, intelligence, and love with the position that I'm in right now. This is the next level of my life purpose. The next level for me is to become my teachings. Not just to teach, but to become my teachings. Now, I've been doing that, for the last 10 years, but like really emphasizing that going forward. I've redoubled my commitment to this work, going all in on my teachings. Here's what's coming next for Actualized.org. Currently, I'm working simultaneously on 100 new episodes. This is like my roadmap for the next 2 years, basically. At best, I can release about 50 episodes a year, at best. So I'm working on about 100 of them, brainstorming them, outlining them. I bought like 10 whiteboards that I'm working on simultaneously, developing all these ideas, interconnecting them, like working from the big picture down to individual episodes. So expect a lot of very practical, deep topics and episodes coming in the future. Not a rehash of the old stuff, but more new stuff. Believe it or not, yes, there's still hundreds of totally new topics that I haven't covered yet and that are going to be important and that you're going to want to stick around for. So stay tuned for all those. And then also what I'm committing to and I'm getting really serious about is courses. Specifically, I'm working on 2 courses. One course is going to be on how to reprogram your mind, rather. And the second course is going to be on how to access the deepest levels of God realization, and also on psychedelics, how to use psychedelics for those purposes. So those 2 courses I'm going to be working on, and I hope to release probably one in 2022, this year, and then the next one a year after that. So again, this is sort of like my roadmap for the next 2 years. These courses are going to be life-changing courses. The first course on reprogramming your mind is going to be very practical, and it's going to work for everybody who's into any kind of self-improvement or spirituality. And then the second course, which is going to be on the highest levels of God realization, that's going to be my most advanced material, totally life-transforming stuff. I'll show you how to access levels of consciousness that are completely unimaginable, even to those people who have been studying spirituality for decades. And there I'll share with you my deepest realizations. And I'll help you to completely deconstruct your mind and reality. That's like for the most serious of you. So that's coming. Now, when it comes to these courses, I'm not going to be marketing them to you. I'm not going to be chasing you down to buy these courses. And so I'm going to expect that you're going to be wise enough to follow along with me long enough that when these courses release, you're going to find out about them. Because if you just watch a few of my videos and then you leave, you're never going to hear from me again. You're never going to even know these courses came out. And you're going to miss these courses, which are going to completely transform your life. This is going to be some of my best work. And I think it's going to be some of the best work that there's going to be within spirituality and within self-help. Very life-changing stuff. But I'm not going to be chasing you, asking you to buy this stuff. So what I recommend you do is either subscribe to this channel if you're on YouTube, and or go subscribe to my newsletter. I have a newsletter that is specifically used just to make big announcements about courses or big stuff that I release. I don't release some sort of like fluffy bullshit every week kind of newsletters. Like literally, I'm going to send out one email when my new course comes out and then another one a year later. So I'm not going to be spamming you with a bunch of emails. This is a way to ensure that we don't get disconnected. Because, even when you subscribe to YouTube, sometimes YouTube doesn't send out the notifications, or you might miss a video, or your YouTube feed is full of a bunch of people you subscribe to, and so you just might miss the announcement for a new course. So if you want to make sure that you don't miss these courses, like I'm really committed and serious about these courses. If you're serious about developing yourself, go to Actualized.org/newsletter. I'll have a link down below. Actualize.org/newsletter. Put your email in there and your name. Sign up to it. I promise you're not going to get spammed. Use a legitimate email address, not some bullshit one that you use for spam. When the course is ready, and only if the course is ready and I'm fully satisfied with the course, because I'm not going to release a course that I'm not satisfied with, then I will send you an email that it's out. And that's going to be some serious, some serious personal development and some serious spiritual development for you. So I'm hyping this up right now because I'm really excited about it. Like, I've redoubled my effort here with Actualize.org with all the 100 videos that I'm working on and these courses. I'm planning it all out simultaneously, so I have sort of a roadmap for the next 2 years. And part of the way in which I want to lead more consciously is I want to give you a larger vision of where we're going together in this work. So it's not just like you're getting a one-off video. It's like, oh, Leo, help me how to be more decisive, or help me how to get laid, or help me make some money. It's like, no, we're doing something much, much, much bigger than that with this work. You know the level of depth at which I teach. Almost nobody teaches at this level of depth. My courses are going to be even deeper than that. This is your chance to make a decision that can alter the whole trajectory of your life going forward. And I also want you to start thinking about your development more long-term than just watching a couple of random videos here and there. Like, really stick with me for this journey. We're not here for a few episodes. We're here for the next decade. We're here for the next 100 episodes. We're here for the next 2 courses. We're here to show you how to reprogram your whole mind. We're here to get you to the point where you reach the highest levels of awakening humanly imaginable. That's possible, but that takes some long-term commitment and vision, which is what I want from you. I don't ask very much of you. I don't advertise much to you. I don't pitch to you and do a bunch of sponsored deals and bullshit like this. These courses are a way for me to sustain myself, survival, to sustain Actualized.org without having to sell out to corporate sponsors and a bunch of bullshit ads and all sorts of gimmickry like this. I've been very careful to avoid that kind of gimmickry with my channel and with my website. These courses are really how I sustain myself and how I sustain these teachings and all the free content that I do. I couldn't do this free content otherwise. In fact, last summer, YouTube killed about half my business in a single day just by tweaking their algorithm. I lost about half my views in a single day and forever from that day forward. Also lost half my revenue in a single day and forever from that point on. I'm not blaming YouTube. I'm not saying they demonetized me or anything like that. No, just algorithm changes, right? YouTube is always changing their algorithm, tweaking stuff, so I get less traffic. I'm not mad at them or anything like that. This is just how business works. This is how YouTube works. YouTube is maturing as a platform and so forth. YouTube is more competitive than ever. Now, everyone is chasing after TikTok. TikTok is the hot new thing now. YouTube is doing these YouTube shorts where they're doing these like short little videos that are under a minute long. My content can't compete with that. I need to do hour-long, 2-hour-long, 3-hour-long episodes. That's what I need. I'm not going to be doing stupid TikToks, right? It is getting more challenging for me to survive and for these teachings to survive in this kind of environment. People's attention spans are getting shorter and shorter, and people are getting stupider every year. I don't know in 10 years if there's going to be many humans left who can even sit and watch an hour-long video anymore. Seems like everything's transitioning to TikTok-style videos. Again, I'm not angry or bitter about that. It's just how things are. And so it does help a lot for the success and survival of this work and this channel that you guys buy the courses. The courses are how I sustain all the free content. I can't do free content otherwise. And in return for that support of buying the courses, what I'm committing to is to make some really amazing courses so that whatever you pay for the course, you're going to feel like it was a steal or a bargain at the end of the day. I love to over-deliver on content. I love to over-deliver on the courses. I love to make the courses very practical. That's what I'm committed to. So if you're interested in that, go to Actualize.org/newsletter, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed. Stick around. We've got amazing stuff. My best work is yet to come. I feel like my understanding of reality is finally reaching a level after 10 years that I've just dreamed of, right? In the beginning of this work for me, the vision was that I would be able to reach this profound level of interconnected understanding of reality and then to be able to share that with others. It's taken so long. It's taken so much longer than I thought because reality turns out to be so much deeper than I thought, so much bigger than I thought. But finally, I'm starting to reach that point, and I'm just so excited to share the next 100 videos that I'm going to be releasing. Are going to be amazing, amazing content. And then the courses are going to be even better than that. So I hope you stay tuned for that. And thank you for your support. The last thing I want to say is this. I hope you realize that you are a diamond in the rough. That's what you are. The brilliance inside of you is waiting to be unleashed. But this diamond, it's rough. You yourself may not realize that you are this diamond yet, because this diamond needs to be cut and polished. And there's an art to cutting and polishing a diamond correctly so that its full brilliance can shine. You got to cut it at the right angles, you got to polish it with the right materials and so on. And then you've got this beautiful, brilliant diamond. That's what you are. That's your full potential. And this work is about cutting and polishing yourself year after year after year after year in more sophisticated and nuanced ways until you get to the point where you start to shine with your brilliance. Your inner brilliance shines, and it inspires everybody else around you to do the same for them. And this is the highest joy in life. This is really the sort of meta life purpose. Whatever your specific life purpose is, that's great. But then the meta life purpose for everyone that applies to everyone is to realize that everyone is this diamond in the rough, and it's just about finding ways of correctly cutting and polishing yourself up over a period of years and decades to allow your brilliance to shine. And the saddest thing is the majority of people have no idea that how brilliant they are inside if they would cut and polish themselves up. And they confuse themselves for just ordinary stones and rocks, when really they're diamonds. That's your true nature. You're a diamond of infinite brilliance. And that's what this work and these courses and this spiritual stuff, this is what it will teach you. And this is where you get the highest joy in life, is when you are able to shine with your brilliance, and this brilliance becomes infectious and infects everybody close to you in your life. And that's ultimately what we're working here towards. We are not working towards just helping you to improve some little aspect of your life. Our goal is total. It's the total transformation of your life into brilliance in your unique way. That brilliance will be different for different people. Depending on what your career you're going to choose and what kind of relationships you're in and so forth. But this is what is going to keep you from becoming depressed and nihilistic and cynical and bitter with life, is to find that brilliance. And that's where you find meaning in life. The meaning in life comes from polishing yourself up until you're shining and infecting others. And that fills you with joy, endless joy, a joy that is better than any amount of money you'll get or sex or any of the material pleasures that you can have. Although you will get those naturally along the way. So this is not a replacement for that. You'll get those things too as you're polishing yourself up. You know why? Because the more brilliant you become, the more value you put out into the world, the more attractive you get to other people, and also the more you start to attract opportunities to yourself and good things materially and money and all of that. That all comes with discovering your own inner brilliance. And that's basically all there is to life.